Welcome to The Detail. I'm your host, Cathy Antunes, and you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida. With me today is Billy Townsend, also known as Public Enemy Number One. Billy is a former school board member for in Polk County. He writes a blog titled Public Enemy Number One, and I'm going to ask you to tell the story again about how you chose that title. Billy Townsend's also uncovered his analysis of what's going on in Florida education is truly noteworthy. In particular, Billy has documented what he calls Florida's great regression. This was published in the Tampa Bay Times, but how Florida students drop the most in achievement between 4th and 8th grade. We are the worst in the country when it comes to the drop in student achievement. Billy Townsend, thank you so much for joining me today. You're always interesting.
Thanks for having me, Cathy. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking on June 12th of this year. A federal subpoena was given to people involved in the bid rigging scandal pertaining to a contract for Jefferson County schools. The bid rigging scandal led to the resignation of then Commissioner of Education Richard Corcoran. And of course, Richard Corcoran is now the president of New College of Florida. So we like to really dig in and tell the whole story here. Billy, when it comes to Richard Corcoran and the bid rigging, we're going to go back to why Jefferson County. Maybe we should start there. Why was Jefferson County a focus of Richard Corcoran and the agenda of those who were advocating for charter schools in Florida? What was going on there?
Well, there was a time back in 2015, 2016, that era, when people like Richard Corcoran pretended to care about how poor children scored on tests. It was effective in attacking public schools. This grew out of the big failure factories, Pulitzer Prize package that the Tampa Bay Times put out in 2015, which was actually about segregation. But Richard Corcoran spun the tagline into an opportunity. That's what he does. He's sort of a con man and opportunist. Jefferson County is very poor, very small. It's three schools.
Their annual budget is $8.5 million a year.
I think that's right.
I've looked it up. I mean, it is really a small.
Florida's smallest. It's Florida's smallest district, I believe. And it's essentially 3 schools at one site. And they had done their test scores have been the lowest in the state for a long time. And Corcoran and folks saw an opportunity to exploit the failure factories stuff and do a charter takeover of Jefferson County. Mm-hmm. The guy who succeeded Richard Corcoran as Commissioner of Education, who is currently the Commissioner of Education, Manny Diaz, he worked for a company called Academica, which owned a company called Somerset, which was the charter company that got the sweet deal to take over the Jefferson County schools. But as they quickly figured out, that work is hard. And when you're trying to serve very poor district with very low resources, even when the state dumps millions and millions and millions and extra money into you, you don't do you have to care about what you're doing to do well. By the 4th and 5th years, their scores had collapsed far below anything that had ever happened at Jefferson.
So can we stop there, because that piece is pretty huge. I actually would like to play Richard Corcoran's own remarks. This was when he was serving as Secretary of Education in Florida. So actually, I would say it's actually public record, but you can find this speech on YouTube. And Richard Corcoran is giving a talk. It's called Education is Freedom. He's talking to a Hillsdale College audience, and he's discussing the importance of getting children to read by third grade. So I just wanted to play a little bit of this.
And so all of that gets to the 2 points I do want to impress upon you as I got to the department, is that now you know the philosophy, you know the one thing that we can do to change people's lives. We talked about it last night, we can't force everyone to be raised in a two-parent home, but we know that the consequences or the derivative of that is just enormous. But what we can do, and what we are doing, is trying to give every child that world-class education, help them become good citizens, good spouses, good community leaders, and recognize the value and inherent value of an education. But we're not there. And not only are we not there, we struggle more and more and more to get there. And so I'll give you facts in Florida. And on the National Assessment of Education Progress, which all the states take, we're in the top 4 for reading in 4th grade. The number 1 is Massachusetts, pretty perennially. I think it's going to change as a result of COVID, because we're the only state that opened up our schools face-to-face instruction to any child who wanted it. Boston's still closed. And so, but Massachusetts is number 1. They're number 1, and they're like 45% on the NAEP exam at or above basic, which means I always say 55%. The number 1 state and the richest country in the history of mankind, the number 1 state has 55%, give or take. Florida, we're like at 39, so we're at over 60% of our 4th graders that are somewhat, partially, or fully illiterate. And so now take Florida, we have our own state assessment we give in 3rd grade. And our 3rd grade assessment, we basically have similar numbers. 44% of our 3rd graders in English are either partially, fully illiterate. They're getting 1s and 2s. And when you have that, what you're doing in a society is not only are you creating people who have no concept of what it means to self-govern or be a citizen, they have no hope. And the most dangerous person in any realm, a society, in life, in a schoolyard, wherever, it doesn't matter, take hope away from a human being and they become extremely, extremely dangerous. And I think you see that play itself out. And so how do you move that? You know, I say to my staff all the time, we ought to just send letters to every single 3rd grade parent, which is literally, 55% of them, and say, hey, dear Mrs. Jones, Billy's a great kid, enjoyed having him in class, but here's the bottom line. There's no hope for him. He's toast. There's nothing we can do, because we know this fact too. If you're a 1 and 2 in 3rd grade, because we had 20 years of accountability history, then I asked my staff, give me every single graduate of 3rd grade that became a 10th grader, because now we have 20 years of history, and tell me what they were in 10th grade the last time we give the ESA exam. And guess what? 86% who are 1s and 2s, either partially or functionally illiterate, are partially or functionally illiterate in 10th grade.
So that's Richard Corcoran, and he's basically giving this talk and saying, and there's data to support it's really important to get kids reading by 3rd grade. He's right about that.
Not really. I mean, because get kids. I mean, the words he tosses around are absurd. Reading scores have gradually crept up a little bit over the country over the last generation. So you're telling me that 55% of America has been illiterate for our entire existence. That is garbage. Mm-hmm. The reading test scams are very much like that's a whole other thing. Like whether you are proficient or illiterate are terms that have no meaning. Like there's not a rash of illiteracy in the I think it's really important to actually just reject a lot of those.
Well, he's using inflammatory language.
Right. Well, I mean, they're all just nonsensical on their face, and a lot of them have been very common language of the left-leaning reform movements of the years who love charter schools and all that. I mean, it's so put that aside. Third grade is generally thought to be a year that makes sense to check in to see how you're doing. There's no real magic to it. The main magic to third grade in Florida is that we hold kids back in mass, which means they don't take the fourth grade NAEP as fourth graders. So we get to cheat on the fourth grade NAEP. And as I think you may be about to ask, what Corcoran doesn't talk about there is what happens in eighth grade after in Florida, which is all those kids collapse.
Right. So. Yeah. So explain, because he makes the point about Massachusetts. And the thing is, Massachusetts, #1 in the country, stays #1 in the country.
Right. They're number 1 or 2 every year in fourth grade. They're number 1 or 2 every year in eighth grade in everything. Florida has made itself top 10-ish every year, sort of in fourth grade. By eighth grade, we're usually in the 30s or the 40s. And so nobody's got a drop like that. And that's because we cheat in the third grade. I mean, in the fourth grade, and the whole system is built to make kids miserable, and they check out as they age. Florida has.
Hang on. I'm going to try to give a synopsis of what happens, and you fill it in. Okay. So what happens is parents get wind of the fact that their kid's going to be held back, or they see that their kid is struggling.
Right.
And they know that holding a child back, and you made this point in your research, holding a child back can be devastating actually to them emotionally and academically. It actually has a really negative impact on them. It disrupts their social relationships, lots of things. So those parents take their child, get a voucher, which they're allowed to do, put them in another school. So those kids aren't part of the testing pool. Like Florida's scores are artificially inflated because they're eliminating the low scoring kids.
Right. And then most voucher schools are scams, and the kids come back in before eighth grade. And so that's how you get the pattern. It's very cynical, and Richard Corcoran's a very cynical, unserious person. None of that stuff he talks about, he cares about. Like there's no, he's just saying stuff that makes that he can sell. So I mean, so I think what you're trying to do is tie this to his own metrics for DOE Jefferson, right?
Well, what I want to do, let me share this screen with you, because I put together a table using the data from the Jefferson County. This is just the Florida reading scores.
Oh, this is good. Yeah.
And so what you're looking at here, and for obviously many of you are listening, but we are going to put this up on YouTube. The whole impetus, what happened in Jefferson County, and you make the point of Manny Diaz, who is now the current commissioner of education, who is with Academica. The man works, he's with charter schools.
He was then, not now.
Oh, okay. Okay. So here we are, Jefferson County schools. They're consistently underperforming. Why? Well, Diane Ravish says the #1 predictor of academic success is or failure is poverty. This is a very poor school district. And so, yes, there's social reasons why these kids aren't doing well. In 2017, the Florida State Legislature approved the takeover of Jefferson County schools. It is the only school district in Florida that went fully privatized. And as you said, it's a small campus, K through 12. They're all in one spot, not that many kids. So what we're looking at in 2017, when Academica took over, the test scores for reading proficiency in third grade, and by, Mr. Corcoran's own estimation, it's his metric, but a lot of people would say that data supports this, that third grade reading proficiency is really important. 41% of kids in Jefferson County were reading at a third grade level. By the time they were done in Jefferson County schools, the third grade reading proficiency was only 19%. It was worse. Math stayed pretty level, but reading absolutely tanked. And they didn't renew the contract for Academica in Jefferson County because it was, and this is another thing, they're differing. There's some news reports out there that said, oh, Academica was hired. I can see this rewriting happening. Academica was hired to transition them back to local control. No, Academica, there was an expectation they would keep going. And then they bailed when these kids we're at 19% reading. I mean, is that a fair read on this, Billy?
Yeah. I mean, they tanked the performance worse than it was before they took over, despite having far more resources. I mean, the state wanted to make this like their showpiece, and they squandered them. I think part of the grand jury that's investigating this now, I hope will look where those resources went. Like if some of those resources went to other parts of Academica that weren't Jefferson County, that would be awfully interesting. I don't know if it did or not, but I think, it's a very cynical story. They sold it on idealism. Oh, we're going to give kids hope, and by the end, they were bailing on them and trying to squeeze out the last little drop of cash they could out of them. In the meantime, we all spend a lot of time talking about words like proficiency and like that don't have any meaning. I don't necessarily accept that 19% of kids are proficient at reading in Jefferson County, because I just don't think that means anything. What I do accept is that on the state's metrics, their chosen charter school company crashed the district.
Totally fail. I mean, it was
right.
And then they bailed,
Right.
So what happened after that? So this is what's the federal grand jury looking at, right? So after that, they had COVID money. Every school was getting extra dollars. Tom Edwards, a local school board member, was on last week, and they're called ESRA. I'm not sure what that acronym stands for.
ESSERs,
extra dollars.
ESSER for something.
Yeah, so they were related to the pandemic. So Jefferson County schools was getting these extra dollars, and what Corcoran and the powers that be wanted to do was to hire a consulting company to transition them from the big fail of Academica back to local control, right?
Right.
So what did that look like? Walk us through that.
Well, the company they were doing the Shady Deal with ahead of time, before the actual bid process, is called MGT. It's a guy named Trey Traviesa who runs that. He's a former legislator and former business partner of Corcoran, and they were going to use ESSER money to pay at least some of MGT's contract to be what's called an external operator. That's a term that gets used in public education in Florida quite a bit. They were going to impose this company on Jefferson County that didn't want it. Interestingly, the law requires it to be a competitive bid. There's lots of evidence that the bid was shaped before there was ever a process, and no one expected anybody else to apply or to make a proposal. And then all of a sudden, the vice chancellor of the DOE, who had kind of been in charge, who kind of been partly in charge, her name is Melissa Ramsey. She and a sitting Board of Education member, Andy Tuck, formed a company kind of on the fly and put their own proposal in. Well, you can't bid on your own stuff. Like you
right.
be an employee of DOE and bid on a DOE contract. As soon as they did it, like all sorts of red flags went up, and Corcoran Tuck resigned immediately, and Ramsey pretty much did too, and Corcoran accepted their resignation. Said, "Oh, they've got good hearts." But what they did by doing that was they blew up the really corrupt bid process, which was MGT. And shortly thereafter, the Tampa Bay Times reported a blockbuster story about all the stuff that had happened with MGT before the Ramsey bid came out. And then I did a whole bunch of stuff, and it's really just all kind of analyzing all the gross, dirty parts of it. I even filed a complaint, an official complaint with the Inspector General.
Hang on a second?
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened was there was with any process, there's a request for proposal typically, right?
Right.
And so what I believe the Tampa Bay Times reported, I mean, certainly been reported, was that the bid specifications that MGT knew what they were, that they might have even been written with MGT in mind.
They wrote the RFQ. It's called a request for quote. They wrote the RFQ from a draft agreement with MGT that they hadn't signed yet.
Just lifted from
right. They actually wrote the agreement first.
Okay.
Didn't execute it yet, and then used it to do the. I mean, that's what was reported.
Okay. And the thing is, the bid process. So you've got this process. You're supposed to write it. So only, companies that can do the work, right, will recognize themselves and apply. But then if a company has the inside track like that, that's corrupt. And then the bid process was only open for a week.
Right. Well, and an important thing, the chancellor of the DOE at the time, his name is Jacob Aliva. He's currently the commissioner of education, the top education official in Arkansas, doing a lot of the same dumb stuff, that dumb culture war stuff that Florida's been doing. Now he probably got more exposure than almost anybody else, because it says in the investigation of this that he told his subordinates to use the MGT agreement as the RFQ template. I mean, I kind of think he's the one that's most on the hook on its face. But you have to remember, Richard Corcoran oversaw all of this. He was the commissioner of education. Jefferson County was his pet project, both as Speaker of the House, then as commissioner of education as well. Like, he's at the top of all of it. And Melissa Ramsey wrote in the investigation that she understood Corcoran would personally be picking the winner.
Well, and here's the thing: he resigned when the whole thing went bust, right? When the whole
I mean, not immediately. I mean, it took 3 or 4 months. When by the time Jefferson County got the schools back, that's about when he resigned. It wasn't overt that he said, "I'm resigning because of this scandal," but the timing was certainly,
you never say that,
suggested. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the thing. So here's Richard Corcoran, former Speaker of the House, former state legislator. Here's Trey Traviesa, former state representative, the principal of the consulting firm that is, supposedly that they're using the specs to get the contract. There's a lot of state legislators in the mix here. What was their business relationship? They were partners. Was it education related, or do you?
Yeah, I think there was some sort of education business. It may have even been a nonprofit. They were in together. Yeah. I think it was in like the late 2000s, like 2008 or 9. But don't hold me to that.
I remember reading about that, and I think you're right that it was a nonprofit. Ralph Arriza was also part of the mix in here, And, I find him to be, again, it's like the 9 lives of state legislators.
He's the chief lobbyist for the Florida Charter School Association. He was
Wow. Okay.
He was he's their top lobbyist. He was thrown out of the Florida legislature some years back because he drunk dialed somebody and made a lot of like racist threats and things like that. He was actually convicted of witness tampering. He's in the middle of the DOE Jefferson thing. He's got several relatives who work for and he's part of a meeting with MGT before the bid is before the RFQ is put together.
So,
that apparently a lot of weird stuff went down. We still don't know what happened in that meeting, but that's very much part of the subpoena for the grand jury.
So to give people some sense of the proportion, right? So they've got these millions of dollars of COVID money that schools don't usually have, right? And this contract was going to be 1.8. I've read a couple different accounts. One said 4 million. One said it was a $1.8 million contract, but and it was a multi-year contract. So maybe it was 1.8 per year. Maybe that's what it was. I think it was
a two-year contract.
Okay. So this is a lot of money, right? For a school with an annual budget of 8.5 million, 1.8 on a consultant, which I think there is, very good reason to be skeptical of consultants in general. Not that they don't do good work sometimes. I'm sure a lot of them do, but there are some, and then when it's the consultant who is, the former business partner of the head of education. So the school board at Jefferson County, who was basically 5 years earlier, they were told, we're taking over, right? And then after Academica and Somerset Academy screwed it up royally, then they said, here you go, we're giving it back. Oh, by the way, we want to take all this money. My guest is Billy Townsend. We're talking about the federal subpoenas regarding the bid rigging of the Jefferson County school contract, transitional contract that was proposed, but never actually was awarded. And this was under the oversight of Richard Corcoran, the former commissioner of education. So my point before I realized, I've got a break, the school board was being handed back a big mess by Academica and by the state, but the state also wanted to get their fingers on this COVID money. And the amount of money for a school with an $8.5 million annual budget, they wanted to take these extra dollars, 1.8 million. And, it's pretty clear that this was not a fair bidding process, but the school board said, no way. We've got other things. We've got other things we want to pay for. What was your take on how the school board interacted with this process? I mean,
they're pretty heroic, really. They fought and they got some good help from their local legislators. One Democratic, one Republican. I think it does show the power of focused public opinion. As soon as people started to talk about this, and by people I mean like a legislator like Allison Tant, when they started to use it against Ron DeSantis, they started to use it politically, it got fixed very, very fast. And the idea that ESSER money, I mean, even after the MGT contract fell apart, they were going to require them to spend ESSER money on stupid stuff. Like they were going to dictate to them how they could spend it. They eventually just gave that up, and I think that was because of the public attention to it that really came around March and April, if I remember right.
2022, right?
Right. It was, and that was kind of during the legislative session, some attention was brought to bear on it. People realized how explosive it was as an issue potentially. And I think the state just wanted to wash its hands and hope it would go away. And so they just gave the schools back to Jefferson and let them do what they wanted to do. And it did kind of go away for a while. And then all of a sudden in June of this year, like almost a year later, we get word that there's a federal grand jury investigating it, which is very interesting.
I think it's federal money, right? These dollars. Yeah. And if you're looking at potentially strong arming a local school board, because they were taking control back, and yet you've got the state trying to get in there and dictate how a school with a meager budget, right? To send a multi-million-dollar contract to a friend, misappropriation of federal funds, or the attempted misappropriation of federal funds, is kind of a big deal, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on the ins and outs of federal law. I don't want to speculate on what they're looking at. What's interesting about the subpoena is that it doesn't include Richard Corcoran in any way. It's the only like he's not named in it. They name Ralph Arriza, and they name like a whole bunch of the other people, and it's all that's very, very interesting to me. It suggests that maybe he's kind of conspicuous by his absence.
Well, I do want to get to the whole salary issue, because you did a really nice bit of charting his salary versus other schools. I thought that was pretty interesting. But the subpoena, so this June 12th federal subpoena, which was came out of the Gainesville office, Gainesville, Florida, but it's the Inspector General in Pembroke Pines is overseeing this, which in Broward County. So this is kind of across the state, but they're asking for text messages, emails. It's pretty voluminous. So, to be clear, we don't necessarily know about anybody testifying, but right now it just seems to be information gathering, their communications about what.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I wouldn't even begin to speculate what who's been subpoenaed, who hasn't. That's I've seen the subpoena, like the informational subpoena, and it focuses very much on the stuff I have written that people should be focused on. So I'm interested in that. That any information about that meeting that happened, I believe it was November 1st, 2021. Like, I think that is part of it. So we'll see. I mean, Ralph Arriza is featured pretty prominently in the subpoena, and Ralph and Richard are joined at the hip. I mean, that's a duo.
The November meeting is the meeting where they were getting together to plan this contract for the consultant. Right. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. I'm kind of, Ralph Arriza made an appearance in the news when Ron DeSantis was running for governor for the first time.
Yeah, right.
DeSantis had made it's interesting in retrospect, the CRT issue, and you've got Governor DeSantis made a comment, and his competitor was Andrew Gillum, an African-American man. And DeSantis said, we don't want to monkey this up, talking about the economy, which there was a lot of concern over that kind of a remark. And Arriza was going to head up a fundraiser, and his name was eliminated because DeSantis didn't want any questions about racism. But here we are with now an administration that is looking to whitewash the history of slavery in the United States. So these are important red flags, right?
Oh yeah. Those were quaint times. I think it bears repeating. The chief lobbyist for the Florida Charter School Association in 2018 was considered too racist to take part in a Ron DeSantis fundraiser. Mm-hmm. He subsequently became the unofficial chancellor of grift in Corcoran's DOE, he would like when I was an actual board member in Polk County, we got an email from Ralph because we had turned down some charter school he wanted to do, and he said, "I'm sending this from Richard Corcoran's office." Like he's a big name dropper. I asked Corcoran about Ralph at a board of education meeting. When he goes, Ralph's a friend. Ralph's got a good heart.
Everyone's a nice guy. Everyone's got a good heart.
Yeah. So I mean, if Ralph Arriza, who used to be too racist for Ron DeSantis, is a central figure in the DOE Jefferson scandal, that's probably bad news for.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Manny Diaz and looking at Academica, because here's the thing. Another thing reading these news reports is a lot of times the name Academica may not show up. And there's a way that Academica kind of separates itself, I think, to avoid the appearance of taking over education in Florida, because there are four subsidiaries of Academica, which are Academica. There's the Doral Academies, Mater, like Alma Mater, Mater, Pinecrest, and Somerset. Do you think that's a fair assessment? Like they're,
I think so. I don't know that I've done and gone the whole Academica corporate tree. But yeah, that all sounds right. And Doral, there's a college as well.
So the thing about that, Billy, it's like, I thought when I first read it about Manny Diaz's background, I'm like, oh, he's with a college. Okay. Then I realized, like you're saying, Doral College is an arm of Academica that provides the AP classes. I'm like, for college credit. So
it's vertically integrated.
I'm like, Academica is capturing, I mean, obviously you can offer AP classes in high school, but I just thought, oh my God, that's so interesting. They've got this whole other segment of the business that they're doing. And
it's a pretty cynical crew.
Well, and so for me, like with Manny Diaz, Doral College, I just had, if you're reading quickly, you wouldn't know. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is these are AP classes. Okay. That's not really a college, like, no. How do you take a look at what's gone on now with the universal vouchers and an exodus of money for all of the children who are already in private schools, right? Who are now going to be claiming the voucher. Have you taken a look at that at all and how that's playing out around the state? It's pretty early, I know, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the median private school is worse by far than the worst public school. Private schools in Florida are generally terrible. And the ones that aren't terrible, the institutional ones, existed before there ever were vouchers, and vouchers don't pay for their tuition. I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction, particularly for the folks that got the Gardner and McKay vouchers in the past, which were designed to help people with special needs. And they actually, there was some good intent and even some good function behind some of those. Those are more like special education, like that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know that much has changed, other than if you're at a fancy private school, you get, a chunk of your tuition covered. That probably will just lead that school to jack up tuition, would be my guess.
That's happened here already.
I predicted grift inflation out of this when it was coming. So far, I don't think it's affected public schools all that much, because if you keep the pie big enough, then you can give some of the pie to the kids who haven't been in the pie before, like who are in the traditional private schools, and not have it really affect the public schools. Like if there's enough money, whatever your ideological approach is, if there's enough money, you can give money to kids in the private schools and not really affect the kids in the public schools. I think the question becomes when we have a bad economic year, we get a downturn, and there's this fight for resources between the fancy private schools and the that like having to share the pie is what's damaging to public school kids when the pie gets smaller.
When the pie gets smaller, tell me about because I had touched on it before, but you have done an analysis. This federal grand jury, obviously we're wondering about Richard Corcoran. He's the president of New College. You've looked at, there were remarks out there that basically he was, kind of retiring, and then he pops up in New College.
Like he replaced a competent president, a woman who is a competent administrator. I mean, one of the things about Richard Corcoran is he can't administer anything. He's incompetent. Nothing he's ever run has worked. But I think the previous president, they paid like $375 base salary, something like that, and when they hired him as interim after they ran her off, they jacked him up to I think $750 or $800. Like again, I don't have it right in front of me.
It looks like
more than double, right?
Yeah, it's the salary cost per student.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
Your other schools, it's like $20 to $50 a student. So for like UCF, which has the lowest, it might be $20 per student for the president's salary. UF might be, I don't know, 30 or 40. FGCU, Florida Gulf Coast University, they're all in this. They're all just so low. And then you've got Richard Corcoran, over $1,000 per student. This man is earning as the president of New College. The prior president was about.
People say, well, and I had somebody criticize the charters. Oh, that doesn't mean anything. But think about that. That's $1,000 of somebody's tuition going right into his pocket. Money at a college is fungible, and people have to pay that salary. There aren't that many kids to pay it, and they're paying a lot for him.
Because the school has like 620 kids. It's a small school, and it was on the higher end before. I mean, it was $400 a student before. Right. It's more than doubled now. Concerned about they've wrecked a really nice state resource.
Just to grift it. In some ways, I'm like, if we were going to stick Chris Rufo and Richard Corcoran and the rest of these folks somewhere where they could do the least widespread damage to the state. In some ways, I feel terrible for New College. I feel terrible for Sarasota, but at least they're like stuck there. Corcoran had a lot bigger ambitions for grifting than.
No, it wasn't the first college he went to, was it? I mean,
he thought he had FSU rigged. He thought he had that set up, and it didn't work out for him.
I think it's kind of sad to see, though, like you see these state legislators, and I'm someone who actually thinks we should pay them more. We pay them a pittance, and which really keeps anybody who has to earn a living from serving in that job.
Running, right?
Because they make about $30,000 a year. So you're going to get people who rich or have the kind of job that they can do both. That's not many people. But it seems like these guys, whether it's going into lobbying, right, going into consulting and getting state contracts, or, it just looks like they kind of looked around and said, oh,
colleges,
what jobs are out there that pay really well that now I can go after.
We got one here in Polk County. Senator Kelly Argel got hired as the special assistant for relationships to the president of Florida Polytechnic. She makes about $135,000 a year to do nothing. I did a public records request for her work calendar. She had no meetings. She had one or two. Her whole Mondays for an entire month were like nothing. like nothing on the calendar. So I kind of think of Florida Poly and New College as in a grift battle. I think of Corcoran versus Kelly, who's going to out grift the other.
But $100,000 versus nearly $1 million in
I know. I mean, he's clearly
he's
the
winning.
You're right. So, but it's early yet. It's
okay.
It's early. Corcoran has not shown a lot of staying power in his other grifts. He has to move on to the next. Man, I was telling you before. From what I haven't followed the New College thing all that closely, but I think what's happening is there to get a short term kind of sugar high enrollment increase. That's what all the sports are about. Yeah, particularly baseball. Because baseball parents often have money, and I say this from experience. My son wanted to play baseball in college, and we sent him to a little college in West Virginia, and to try to make that happen, and it didn't work out all that well. And I think you're going to have a lot of kids that doesn't work out very well for. It's a high turnover. These schools have tons of a really high turnover. As I understand it, they brought in 80 kids for the baseball team. As you know, they're only not nine kids that can play at a time on a baseball team. But that's typical. Like that's a money making enrollment goosing thing for the school, and I'm sure it's similar for other sports, but baseball is one that brings a bunch of kids in. So you could expect a lot of turnover. I don't think they're going to be keeping a bunch of 4-year students.
We've seen situations where the baseball kids have gotten the better dorms.
Right.
The upperclassmen who usually get those dorms are now living in hotels. It's interesting because Mr. Corcoran had put something out about how, these dorms are in such terrible condition. And like, weren't you the head of the state legislature and part of the reason the school didn't get the funding it needed? They starved New College for a long time. I mean, the facilities, the living conditions were bad, but the state knew about it. It's not news. And now it's kind of like Jefferson County in a way. New College was performing, but
right.
It's the guinea pig aspect. I'm going to have a little prep project, right? I mean, that's to me is what's similar.
Well, but remember how people define performance in college enrollment, and they were vulnerable on enrollment a little bit.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
like I mean, there aren't really any performance metrics that are reliable in any way or followable at the college level, kind of except enrollment. And so they're like, oh, you got too few kids. It's we haven't and that's they use that in the same way they use the test scores at a job.
But can I tell you something as a mom? Yeah. If I had gone on a college tour and seen dorm rooms that were in horrific condition, the way this, I have not seen the dorm rooms as they were described, but it's been pretty well known for a while that the New College dorms are just, hurting. Would I want my kid going there? There's more to the story. It's not, I don't think that you can just go on in and I know you're not saying this, but it's a pretty weak argument that you're going to just trash everything that makes the school great, and take it over and make it a baseball school.
No. I agree with you. I mean, I'm not in any way justifying. I'm just saying that's what they did. They found the vulnerability that they had a fig leaf for exploiting. What they really enjoy is taking a bunch of lib kids and LGBT kids and kids who found a comfortable place to be unusual or unusual in
themselves,
the white. Right. They took a true liberal arts school and
Mhm.
destroyed it with frat boys, which makes them happy. I mean, these are people who try to their goal is to dominate you, and like they get off on people being sad. Like I want like they're classic bullies. They don't react well to being pushed back on or being pushed first. Like when you see what they're going to do. I mean, I don't think there's anything New College could have done. I think it was too vulnerable politically, culturally, and enrollment wise to
What I
have
would say
stopped.
though, I
What's
would
that?
say that the level of naivete about the lengths that these folks go to sometimes to get what they want is it's been out there for a while. Like in Sarasota County, I've been watching this stuff for 15 years now. And when I first started watching, I was like, the arrogance, that bully aspect, not caring at all what the public thought, it's going to be this way. The bought aspect of our politics locally, just, the dark money that was involved. I mean, this stuff's been going on for a while, and many people have not been paying attention. And to that, in that regard, this is the result,
Yeah. It's and you cannot appease them. There is no good faith compromise to make with them. You can't make common cause. You can't like hash out your differences. They are aggression, pure and simple.
Hmm.
And there is no alternative but building a power base that can compete with them, that can push them back, that can stop them.
And having the debates, like going into
having a confrontation. Like, I mean, I think we're having the same saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I actually think New College has been disastrous for Ron DeSantis. I think it really started his collapse. I think the Corcoran salary thing was so blatant. You go back and look. Like, I think this was
old numbers.
I mean that and abortion at 6 weeks, for forced birth at 6 weeks, and just the fact that it became very clear all of a sudden that Trump was going to be able to punch him, and Ron wouldn't do anything. He'd just sit there and take it. And again, these people only respond to dominance. It's all dominance ritual all the time. And if you show them that they can dominate you, can affect your feelings, can make you upset, they're going to exploit that. They're really predatory in that sense.
Yeah. So, Billy Townsend, what topics do you think people should be focused on when it comes to education? Obviously this federal grand jury subpoena is huge, right? And so we got to follow that.
That's not just an education story. That's a big state political story, big state power story, depending on what happens. And perhaps they come back and say there's nothing wrong here. Who knows?
We don't
Who knows? I mean, I think you watch that. I think education wise, I just think the story, how I would put this is the state of Florida has destroyed its public system and its private system, and we will have no alternative but to rebuild them both. Vouchers have done more damage to private schools than they have to public schools, and I don't because they've created all these fly by night schools.
Okay.
They're like I said, the median private school is not what you think of as a school. It's a door on a strip mall. It's a little cheap church trying to subsidize its church life with a school. The damage that's been done because what really is the essence of education is adults who want to be in education, who have things to share. Private schools are desperate to recruit public school teachers. I mean, they can't fill private school classrooms anywhere they can fill public school. The whole system is dead. mean, you can still go to school. I mean, there'll still be patches of good interaction, but there's no coherent approach. They have destroyed them both, and it's going to be up to us in the state in the next 10, 20 years to rebuild it. I think there was a point, if DeSantis had not been elected, where you might have been able to maybe turn the corner a little bit and maybe save the state. I don't like save the education system, but I don't think that's possible now. I think you can just rebuild it. Yeah. You gotta say, hey, come back in. You got to create an environment that adults want to come back into to be part of. The facilities still exist, so that's good. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to build around potentially.
We're good at building here, right?
right. But that's, I mean, watching when Republicans, and not even Democrats, when Republicans decide to make a turn back to rebuilding public schools, and you see this in fits and starts. That's really the story of Jefferson County, which is a Trump voting county. They demanded their public schools back from these grifters. I think that's going to be the arc that education is going to follow in Florida in fits and starts. I think it started in Jefferson County, and over the next 10, 20 years, if we have a future in this state, you'll see it swing back.
Yeah. Billy Townsend, thank you so much for joining me. His blog is Public Enemy #1 on Substack. It's free. He always has something interesting to say. I thank you so much, Billy, for joining me. And everybody, you have been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida. Thank you all so much for joining me. Be sure to stay tuned for more public affairs programming here on WSLR. Make it a great day.